Welcome to the East End Education Forum. During these shows, we'll be discussing the challenges facing our schools and local innovations designed to meet those challenges. This series is sponsored by the East Hampton Education Foundation. They've provided programming, grants, and scholarships for East Hampton Town Public Schools since 2005. For today's panel, we have four outstanding educators. Billy Barbour, a teacher of social studies at East Hampton High School. Michael Buquicchio, a librarian and research teacher also at East Hampton High School. Meredith McArdle, a third grade teacher at Bridgehampton. And Jessica Rogers, a reading specialist at Bridgehampton. And my name is Bob Tymann. I'm a retired educator. I have 30 years at varying positions in the system, and I will be your narrator. Today's topic is the silver lining, lessons learned. And as I said in the previous show, all of society is adjusting to this pandemic. A lot of it, we can't wait for it to be over. We want to get back to no masks and being able to see people face to face and eat in restaurants. But there are some things we do differently now that will probably stick because they're more efficient. Most businesses will not go back to 5 days in the office. They'll wind up doing 2 or 3 because it works better. We'll probably never go to shopping the way we used to. We now get many things online that we never would have thought of ordering before. And that's not going to change. And these changes were already in the mix. It was already happening, but the pandemic accelerated those changes. So although we want to get back to normal, we do want to get back to a normal that takes the lessons learned from the pandemic and puts them to good use so that we're doing things more efficiently. And that's what this discussion about education is going to be focused on. How can we take the struggles, the failures, the problems we faced during the pandemic, and the lessons we learned doing that, how can we take what was good there, what made us more efficient, what helped students learn more efficiently, and keep that, and put it into our classrooms so that the new normal is better for students. So the first topic I'd like to discuss is basically communication. How did COVID change the way you communicate, not only with your students, but with your students' families and with your colleagues? Jessica, how did that affect you?
I would say, I think just knowing that that's what we had to do. We had to communicate. It was the first thing we had to do each day, whether it was through an email, through a telephone call, or of course through the Google Meets. I would say just communication was number one. And also, being a parent myself, knowing what I had to do on my side, just with my own children's teachers, I think it was just, communication was just number one. And I think it taught us that lesson of it needs to continue and just keep that strong connection between, your students' families, and that piece was really important to me.
Do you think that will continue with things like Google Meet and Zoom? I mean, is that something that you will continue to use to communicate with families?
I think it does in some ways. If a parent can't come in to talk, in person, you can easily find another way to communicate, even through texting and again emails. So yes, I do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Billy, how did it affect you?
Well, I think that the technology made it easier to communicate with parents who were struggling with their own, you mentioned that you have kids, I have kids. Parents were under a lot of stress. They had a lot of things on their mind, and the technology piece helped us, find different avenues to communicate and stay in contact with them. And certainly it has created an opportunity for us to be more flexible, I think, with our communication now. I do still value, we just had parent-teacher conferences. I do still value that, one-to-one, because sometimes, I think people are somewhat inhibited when you're on a screen, and I think, oftentimes if you're in that one-on-one, you read body language and cues. Same thing with students. And so I think, those opportunities to meet face-to-face are essential, but we do have these other tools to be able to facilitate communication now when face-to-face is not available.
What about meetings with your peers, your colleagues? Has that shifted? Has that changed?
Not really. I think that we were always in touch with each other, via text or emails. For us, I can't speak for other departments. I can just speak for the social studies department. Especially the people that are in the same area of study. I teach with Devin Parks and Chris Doherty, and we're still pretty tight as far as texting each other, emailing each other, or popping into rooms and things like that. So I haven't really seen that part change. I think maybe if you were in a bigger district with a lot of teachers from different parts of a sizable district, maybe that would be something that would be different. But I think for us, the value of communication was always there, and we would find ways to get in touch with each other, and so that piece for us, I think, is pretty standard still.
Okay. Meredith, how about you?
Yeah, I think it helped to allow for communication to be a lot more consistent and frequent. So maybe in the past it would have been, I have to set up a meeting with this parent, but maybe it's not really appropriate to send a text or an email just because that's the social norms. So I'll have to wait till my prep period where I can call them, and then they'll have to call me back, and before you know it, a lot of time has passed. Whereas now, where we're all just using what we can, whatever's available to us, I can send a quick text and it is a little bit more acceptable. And then eventually I still want to meet with them face to face, but in the meantime, there could be a lot more smaller check-ins that seem to be a lot more available.
So you can be more timely.
You could be more timely,
in
exactly.
communication.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Mike?
I mean, I agree. I think communication with families was obviously something that was so important during such a time of crisis. But I thought was unique was the opportunity for collaboration using such technology. So I was fortunate enough to collaborate with a professor of Queens College, and she's also a research professor for graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to, first of all, she observed me virtually using Google Meet, and that's kind of where the relationship started. And we were able to basically set up a research symposium virtually with her graduate students and my AP research students. And they were in breakout rooms, and they were presenting their research to each other in preparation of their final assessment. And it was one of the best collaborations I've ever had, as an educator. And it all started with a Google Meet, and we're actually continuing it this year, going forward. And it's interesting because on the East End, we don't have universities out here to partner up with. So it was just a great opportunity, and it's something I see educators doing a little bit more of in the future.
Yeah, our distance out here is kind of why we like it out here, but also what inhibits collaboration, and this is getting over that hurdle with technology.
Yeah.
After you mention that, we could bring in speakers that we could never think of before to be in our classrooms. We no longer have to put them up at a hotel.
Yep.
They can Zoom in.
And even for students to collaborate, right? It was so amazing to see a student, learning community formed virtually, and my students really responded well to it. And again, we're continuing this collaboration, and we plan on doing it virtually, just because of the distance.
They maintained a collaborative group with the students from Queens College?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Okay. Recently, I read an article in Education Week by Peter DeWitt where he talked about decluttering. And he defines that as abandoning existing low-value practices. How do you think the pandemic and the things we had to do to adjust helped you declutter? Jessica?
Okay, I was just thinking about that, decluttering. Okay, what does that mean to me? Tidying up, you know, the art of tidying up. And then I was thinking, how does that relate to, you know, teaching? And I think, you know, as a literacy specialist teaching reading, and also going back into the classroom last year teaching 4th grade, when we went on remote during Christmas time, the holidays, you know, decluttering by simply reading, just reading to my class. You know, we were reading The Island of the Blue Dolphins, and they all, literally, they would get their pets, their dogs and their cats, and they would sit there and they would just cuddle up with them, and I would read to them through Zoom or through Google. And, you know, like, that was eye-opening, because they still wanted that time with their teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So just decluttering what matters, and that's what mattered. It's the relationships, and just building that, you know, the relationships through, you know, through online ways, and those relationships carried over to this year now. But yeah, I would say just decluttering by finding what's most important. So.
Meredith, how about you with decluttering?
So I think I had to really get to the meat and potatoes of the lessons, because on a screen it's a lot harder. And so I also wanted to allow for that time for the check-ins and checking in to see where they were emotionally that day. And I had one student who Google Meet, for whatever reason, was very hard for him to log into our classrooms for his Google Meet, but it was very easy for him on FaceTime. So we would do FaceTime, and I knew I had to get to the content, but I also knew that he was home alone because both of his parents still had to go to work. They actually got him a little dog to keep him company while he was home alone. So there was a lot of focus on, like, how are you doing? Have you had your breakfast yet? How's Max, your dog? Like, all of those things. And then quickly getting to the lesson. So it was really, okay, what do I really need him to practice doing today? So let's do all the, you know, breakfast and show me Max and all that. And then, okay, here's what I want to show you, and here's what I want you to practice doing. So it just kind of realigned the priorities, and I don't want to take away from the academic piece because that is important, but I guess kind of building an awareness of what they're going through without making it an excuse not to do something. So there was like a real balance. I think that's what I really had to declutter, was finding that balance of the social and emotional piece and the academic piece.
I think it forced us as educators to allow the time to do that, even though we've known for years, we've read all these articles about how important social emotional learning is and having that foundation before you can start learning. I don't think we ever gave ourselves the time to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been forced. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I think that trying to save time wherever you can, so you have an opportunity to individually connect with students. So something that I think worked really well for this was, I know it was talked about earlier, we're creating screencast videos. Mm-hmm. So rather than giving lectures or procedural instruction, if you were to create a screencast, that allows you to not only teach to mastery, because students can take part on their own pace, but you can also check in with students individually. And that was something that I think we all learned that was so important during the pandemic, just to make one sort of individual interaction with a student every day. It goes a long way. So if you can find the time, 38 minutes, 40 minutes periods, they fly by. So if you can, use those tech tools to have more of an opportunity to check in with students, that was something, we're sort of out of the pandemic a bit, but it's still something that I'm using, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if you have 20 kids in front of you in a classroom, even though you know you want to check in with each one every day. I don't know if you would do it as efficiently as if you were doing it where you had this list and you was, going down the list and connecting via Zoom or Google Classroom with each student. You're not going to miss anybody that way.
Yeah.
So it probably was more efficient.
Can I add?
Yeah,
I just
yes,
want to add
definitely.
on that in the elementary side, we did something called an emoji check-in, and we assigned them each day, and we were live, and they loved it because they would choose their emoji, and then they would, write a sentence about how they're feeling, and it really mattered.
Yeah, we did something similar.
Yeah.
We would have students, we would just post like a random question
Yeah.
at the start of the period on the classroom, on Google Classroom, and it was something fun. Like it was either something they like to watch, like to read, something fun they did over the weekend, and you get to know your students a little bit more every day. And it took 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it took and we had like a waiting room set
Oh,
up,
cool.
for the virtual classroom.
Billy, how about you?
I think in addition to focusing on the quantity over the quality, the quality over the quantity, and the meat and potatoes, as she said earlier, I think on a literal level for me, just getting rid of the paper. Just so many things that in previous years, a do now activity or a document that we want to analyze, little things like that. We were forced to put online, and now that we're back in class, I'm very mindful of, all right, what are the things that are important to hand out, and what are the things that we can throw in on a form or something like that. And it has changed for the better, I think. The instructional time and like we had talked about, being more efficient with the time that you have in class, so you can get to those other emotional pieces and get to the really important parts. Because I teach AP US history. It was one of the classes that I teach. It's 500 plus years of history. When we had the remote ed, there's no way you can get to that. And in years past, we were so focused on pacing and getting there that stopped being as important. And I think that was a good thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, almost every curriculum written for New York State and for AP, there's no way you're ever going to cover it all thoroughly. Using our professional knowledge to make the right choices on what we're going to go deep into, I think is something we probably should have been doing 10 years ago, and now we're rethinking, which is great. Digital literacy. You guys were probably pretty good at that already. But I don't know if all the staff was. I know that it's something I struggle with. And students were probably in all different places as far as digital literacy. Although they all think they're literate, we're not talking about just social media. We're talking about being able to do work on the internet. So how did that work for you? Let's start with Mike this time.
So right at the start of the school year, I attended, this was last fall, I attended a webinar through the Buquicchio Teacher Center, and they had someone come in that was like an expert on the hybrid learning model. And that was actually where I got some of the ideas for the screencasts. And it was just like very simple. It was like, research shows that students tend to lose engagement on like a video after 8 minutes. So you want to keep it short. You want to have visuals. You want to make it personal. Like it should be you making the video, not something you found on the internet. Students like to see their teacher. So have your camera on while you're recording. So little things like that. So I got a lot from that one webinar. It was a few hours long. But then, the start of the school year last year, everyone's doors were open. And it wasn't that we had difficulty using the tech, but it was just simply not knowing there's so much out there, right? So someone down the hall would say, here's like my Bitmoji icon thing. How do you set that up, And it was just like everybody was sharing ideas with each other via email or just coming down to your room. So that was really interesting, and it was all really trial and error. So there was like all these different tech tools and extensions that we added to the Google Classroom and to your Google Chromebook, and some worked well, and some were kind of like time-consuming, and the reward wasn't really there, and we kind of you went from there. And what worked well, like I'm still using some of that stuff this year. It saves time, it's engaging. There's a lot of resources out there, and they're all not great, but it was nice to have everybody sort of, this worked well for me, and you should take a look at it. So.
that idea of trial and error. I mean, allowing trial and error in education, both for the staff and for students, and the possibility or probability of failing at some of it
Yeah.
is just how we learn. And it's never been part of the education culture, and it always, in the research, it always said it should have been. But now maybe we'll get there. Meredith?
So for me, it forced me to kind of check in with my philosophy of education, because I was very anti-screens. I still am not a huge supporter of them. But it would be a rare occasion to even find a movie played in my classroom. And so now I just didn't have a choice. And kind of funny enough, and our principal tells the same story, in the beginning of that school year, the tech guy did a presentation on Google Classroom. And he was telling us, and my co-teacher, who has been, this is his 33rd year teaching, so both of us kind of look at each other and roll our eyes like, we don't need any of this nonsense, like we don't want part of this, and now we have to do it. And so I really learned a lot about how valuable it can be and how it doesn't necessarily take away from kids working together. And also, as far as my own learning curve, suddenly I was checking in with people in the building that I maybe never would have checked in with before, because they were the ones that had to say, here's how you do it, because, humbly, I can admit now that I should have listened a little bit better when he was talking about that Google Classroom thing. But I think it really can point out that the unknown is a little bit daunting, but once you get a chance to dig in and try it and fail at it and try it, it's proves to be really worth it.
Well, I think, again, knowing that you were forced into it, there was no choice, but the expectation was not that you were going to be fantastic at it the first day,
Right.
which is an expectation as teachers we put on ourselves often.
Right.
Like, I have to do this perfectly, and that's never reality.
Right.
And being forced to move in that direction, I'm sure you're not unique in that experience. I'm sure many, many teachers went through that same thought process.
Yeah.
Billy?
Well, first of all, our tech department did a fantastic job of getting us all set up and ready to go. Luke and Chuck and the whole department was awesome. They actually have to, give them a shout out too for introducing the Google Suite years before.
Yes.
We got to this place, and so there was a lot of teachers, I think, that were up and ready to go once this thing happened. But I think it's like anything else. For me, there's a lot of the best things that happen or the best ideas come out of frustration. You're frustrated that you can't do this thing or that you can't deliver the instruction in a certain way. So for me, I'm a big, in the spur of the moment, I read the cues of the kids and I realize they're not getting what we're talking about. So I'll, on the whiteboard, draw a diagram or, some stupid stick figure cartoon or something. And when you have kids sitting at home, there was no way to do that. I'm very frustrated that I'm saying something, I can see they're not getting it. I'm getting the sense that I have to deliver this concept in a different way. So, I end up starting to play with a lot of those options that, Mike alluded to. They showed us the Google Suite, they showed us the classroom, they showed us all the stuff, but it's impossible. It's like teaching. You can go to teacher school and somebody can say, hey, this is how you write a lesson plan, but until you're actually in front of the class, and you got 25 kids, staring at you saying, so what do you got for us? You really don't know what you're doing. And so it's trial and error. So I was playing around and I was just going through it, and I came up with this thing called Jamboard. I didn't come up with it, somebody at Google did. So I start using Jamboard, and all of a sudden I realized, rather than wheeling my stupid Chromebook around to show the whiteboard and the notes that I drew, I can use the Jamboard. It goes right to the kids' screen at home, and they can kind of see my stupid stick figures and things like that. And so it's little moments, little things like that that have been replicated thousands and thousands of times in thousands of different school districts that I think that were really special about this whole experience. And to Mike's point, like, I still use the Jamboard. I don't have to go to the side. I can use it, and it saves itself. So if the kid's absent, I can send them my stupid stick figure things. And it's those things that I think we're pretty cool about this whole experience. And so that was just, my personal experience with that type of, frustrating event.
But those stupid stick figure things are really important. That's what makes your class.
Right.
And the students, they wait for that. They need that. So being able to find a way to do that digitally is fantastic. And it's not going to go away. You're not going to go back.
Right.
Jessica.
Well, I was just thinking about that, having my first master's in educational technology and realizing that I was so far away from, the new technology and that I had to figure this out, where I used to think, oh, I got that technology. So there was a big challenge for me for that. And again, I think Google Suite is great. And, we did, I think time, just the speed, the amount of time that, not time, but having to learn it so fast and so quickly and keep up with it in order to get the information out to your students. I think that was a big piece, just the speed of how fast we had to learn, different technologies. And, just again, being a reading teacher, knowing the importance of digital literacy and, understanding how, just that it's the next generation of what children need. It's another way of accessing, reading or books. It's not just an old-fashioned. We love our books, our real books,
right.
But how can you access literacy? And I think that's a big silver lining. Is just the way we've been able to, how can you access, AP World History? Well, there's many ways now that we can access it. So again, just making sure that our students can get that access. It's huge, where we've come, I think.
Well, when I think about, when we read as adults.
Right.
When I'm reading for leisure, I want a book I can hold.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm reading for purpose, when I need information to answer a question that I have for work, I go to the internet.
Yeah.
I don't go to the library. I go to the internet,
Right.
and you Google and you find the answers that are there.
And for some of my readers who are, reluctant, as we call it, we give them YouTube. We can give them the book on YouTube, and they can listen to it. And I think that was great for my son and for many.
Well, I also thinking about that, where it wasn't long ago, or it probably still exists in many places, where if you have to read this book X, you would never allow a student to just listen to it.
Right.
Unless it was in their IEP.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if the purpose is to understand writing and how words are used to pass on emotion, that doesn't need to just be read.
Right.
What is the purpose of reading the book, and can that purpose be achieved in multiple ways besides physically reading?
Right.
Yes,
Yes.
often. So we should be giving our kids, focusing on what we want them to learn, and giving them the opportunity to learn in the way that best fits them.
Right.
So, another thing in the same topic, but equity. Did you see problems of equity which really kind of came to the forefront at the beginning of COVID because of the disparity in access to technology? Billy, what did you see there?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a disparity, and it's not only socioeconomic. I know that there's some houses that were, upper middle class houses that had 5 kids, on trying to be on the internet at the same time, and Wi-Fi is an issue, and so you definitely, I experienced that for sure, and it made it very difficult. I know that, again, I think our district did a really good job of identifying the people that needed some assistance, and getting not only the technology, the hard technology of the Chromebooks, but also helping them navigate the soft technology, for lack of a better term. But it definitely exists, and that's something I think that is I guess a silver lining, if that's the topic. I think the silver lining is recognizing that is something that needs to be addressed, and clearly that's something for politicians and others to assist with, with the quote unquote soft infrastructure, but delivering high-speed internet access is something that has to happen for a lot of communities and a lot of families. So that definitely was underscored by this whole experience.
And that's not a local problem. That's across the board. Yes. Meredith?
Yeah, I definitely saw some inequities. The kids were lucky enough to, everybody got a Chromebook, so that was kind of a good start. But then, like you're saying, the internet was spotty, or there were too many people on it, or then we just saw a lot of other things unfolding, like if there's a couple of families that live in one house, literally where is each kid going to get a quiet space to work? So that was something that we had to work with. And then I referenced before my student who found it better to use Dad's iPhone and join me on FaceTime, but then Dad had to go to work. So what did that mean for the phone? Where was the phone going to be? And so it wasn't just like the digital inequity, but it was also all the other things that it uncovered. But I think the silver lining of it was just the leveling of the playing field, because like you said, it wasn't just the lower income families, or it wasn't specific to one anything. It really was across the board. Everybody was figuring it out together, and we were all just humans together. So that was
nice thought. All just humans together. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think, having gone into the living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms of our students, this was so obvious that some students are not in an ideal work environment. And I think it's, we're seeing an impact on how teachers view homework as a result. I think it's obvious that some students are, they have a setup at home where, I've seen some students, like it looks like an office they have, and like multiple monitors, and it looks great. And then some students, there's zero privacy, no peace and quiet. So you just have to take that in consideration when you're assigning work to students and you're expecting them to have an appropriate environment at home to get it done. So that's something I think all educators were kind of forced to confront as a result of that.
Yeah, and again, look at the research on homework. Does it have a big impact on student achievement? Probably not.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was just thinking about how, as teachers, we just rolled up our sleeves and did what we had to do. If you had to deliver, worksheets, books, deliver, to their homes, teachers did it. We did what we had to do to help to level the equity playing field. So, we were all just trying to do our best. Yeah,
I think the work the teachers did was tremendous. I mean, it was incredible that everything went as well as it did. But that inequity is still there.
Yes.
And that's, again, as Billy was saying, that's a bigger problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, the learning experiences. Okay, your day-to-day work in the classroom with students. When you think about when students are in your room, you can make sure they're on task. And often when I sat in classrooms, the teacher would walk the aisles to make sure worksheets were being completed. Now, that's not possible when you're working digitally. How did you adjust to that, and what did it tell you about your instruction? Mike?
Well, how did I adjust to that? So I had students do something right at the start of class that we could, talk to, that they would comment. It was usually in the form of a comment where they would share an idea and a partner would comment below it, either a question they had about it, or if they agreed with it, if they could add to it, and then something similar at the end of class to sort of wrap things up. So that was one thing that we were able to do digitally, where they were interacting with each other. That worked pretty well. However, as we were mentioning in the other panel, that to expect students to be on a screen for 40-minute blocks, 9 periods a day, isn't very realistic or productive. So, the idea of checking in with your students, giving them some instruction or assigning a screencast, and then letting them go off onto an authentic performance task, that was something that I was striving to do. I knew they weren't going to have another 40 minutes, especially if you're later in the day. You're not going to get 40 minutes out of them in front of the screen.
For people watching, explain an authentic performance task versus a worksheet.
So putting something into practice, right? So when students utilize a skill or a concept and they perform it, right? They're not just commenting on it, summarizing something, recalling something. So they're actually putting it to use. So something that I had my students do was, record, they have a presentation at the end of the course. So they would record little segments of their presentation using Flipgrid, another tech tool that we were exposed to. That works pretty well. And they would share it with a partner would give them some feedback, right? To me, if that takes them, the whole period to prepare, or if it takes them a few minutes later that day to record, I'd rather get that out of them than have them sit through 40 minutes in front of the screen again, over and over.
And when you think about how work gets done outside of school, that's parallels much more what they'll be dealing with once they're out of the academic setting.
Yes, absolutely.
Jessica, how about you?
So the learning experiences, I'm thinking about being in the classroom last year with shields. So if we want to talk about that, we can. The shields, no one liked them. They were hard. It was a barrier to really connect.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just thinking about how, I was able to get around those barriers. And we did that by bringing them socially distanced to a small area. They had their own little areas outside of their desk that they could, partner, kind of talk with each other as, pair, share. And, I think that it was just many ways of, trying to be creative with just connecting them to get away from being, with those barriers, because I feel like that was one of the hard parts. And just increasing student engagement through different projects that we did. We did a lot of different, writing, different, writing units that just got them thinking and sharing, and we did presentations, and that was really great too. So.
And when you say student engagement, how would you define that? Because I know student engagement often can be, well, they finished all the worksheets,
Yeah. Well,
versus they were thinking about the new learning that I wanted them to struggle with. Talk about.
We used the Readers and Writers Workshop, so that brings a lot of ownership to their learning. They pick the books they want to read. They create their own projects, and I think through the writing process, that really gave them the opportunity to be engaged, because they work together in partners and they share with each other what they're writing, and not only student engagement with me as a teacher, with them, but then among each other. And we had a small class size too, so that really helped.
Right. That
Yes.
definitely makes it
Yeah.
easier. But the idea of giving the student, there is a set of skills you want them to learn, but there are many paths. Having them choose their path through the content, and then
Yes.
to demonstrate mastery of the content, giving them that voice and choice. There's a ton of research that talks about how that is how you get students intrinsically motivated to learn,
Right.
which I think is something we can do a much better job at, and are starting to do a much better job with.
Absolutely.
Billy?
Well, to your earlier point about circulating in the classroom, that when we first were doing the remote, I felt like a caged animal. I just even when we were doing hybrid, you kind of have to stay in front of the camera as opposed to wandering around, because I'm very big on having not have a back of the classroom, and kind of getting nearby. But when we had those times when the kids were remote, I think that one of the things that helped me was the breakout rooms, the mini meets, because when you have 25 kids on the thing, it becomes a big jumble of blocks on the screen. But once you pop in and out, and that keeps, they're together, they're gonna, I think be more dynamic with each other, and then you can pop in and see how they're doing, keep them on task. And then I think you get a better, or at least I felt like I got a better sense of how they were doing emotionally and those other pieces, when you see them in a smaller group setting, 2 or 3 kids. And you try to, match them up with, kids that they're comfortable with. It wasn't just a random thing, match them up with kids that they're comfortable with, so they'll be more likely to turn their cameras on and, engage with each other. And I felt that was one way that, I could, virtually, circulate the class as opposed to just stand there and talk to a screen, because, I can't do that. I can't expect anybody else to. So, having those different tasks and breaking them out and limiting the screen time. Okay, here, go do this, and we'll meet back here again. And those are the types of things that, like I said, it was, oftentimes it's frustration that gets you to the point where you come up with some method that's workable.
Right. And that idea of sitting around a table with a small group of students, be it on the screen or in reality, it's a very different conversation. It's a very different interaction than when you're standing in front of 20 or 25 students, and a necessary part of true learning. Meredith?
So initially, I think we're taught in teacher school that we should give kids choice and autonomy over their learning, but it's a little risky because we have to have a lot of trust in them and a lot of faith in them to want to learn. So this time, again, we didn't really have a choice. Like, we had to trust them to show up. And then something that I noticed happened is I would say, okay, whatever student, you have to log in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And they'd be like, yeah, okay. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, you're really going to do it. And then they did. So that alone for 8-year-olds is pretty cool. And then once they were able to log in, if a friend wasn't logged in, the kids who did have parents home would call the parent of the child that wasn't logged in. And typically it wasn't just like, oh, they didn't feel like getting up. Like, there usually was a reason that they couldn't, because they did want to join their class, even if it was just on a screen. And it was the connection that they were getting. So having parents who needed the support get it from parents who could give it, there were great connections made there that never would have been created before. And then as far as like the academic piece of Writer's Workshop, the feedback that I was able to give kids on their writing was also in that kind of real time. I could see as they were typing and could give them a little comment. And then they got excited because it became our routine. When you logged into our class, you got to check the comments that I gave them. So then it was like, oh, she wrote to me, and so there was a little bit of excitement over that and some more intrinsic motivation happening. And then eventually the kids could give each other feedback in that same kind of platform. So
you trusted them, and it worked out.
And it worked.
And it worked. And you were able to give them more timely feedback, which I'm sure will continue because now working on the Chromebooks is the norm.
Exactly.
And when you think about it, I know sharing Google Docs the last few years when I was in education, being able to collaborate on a document with other professionals was really exciting. When 4 or 5 years ago when I first tried to do it, it was like, wow, this is much more efficient, much more productive.
Right.
And you can gather ideas, and you don't all have to be, even though it'd be nice to be around the table, if you can't, this works really well.
Yeah, yeah. And for our kids too, handwriting is a huge piece still. So we're not replacing that, but it is new for them. So it is exciting to get this kind of feedback digitally.
Well, technology, I feel like the main role of technology is to free up time.
Mm.
And if it doesn't free up our time for what we think is more important, then it's not doing its job.
Yeah.
So technology, more timely feedback, having kids be more self-sufficient in their learning, allowing you time then to do the handwriting, the other things that were always difficult to fit in.
Yeah.
In what other ways have we become more efficient at organizing and managing school and connecting students, teachers, and content that we haven't already touched on? So first, let's go with the your classroom or your department. How has this experience helped you become more efficient there? Meredith, you want to start this one?
I guess what comes to mind first is just being a little more open to the technology and understanding, like you said, that it is a tool to help. And so I have a student who had to go to Stony Brook for an evaluation a while ago, and mom didn't know where to go. And so that all happened like very quickly. She was able to send me a text. I was able to go check in, call the doctor, find out where it all was, and off she went. Whereas if technology wasn't allowed or wasn't as embraced, all of those little pieces couldn't have fallen into place quickly.
Would you have been able to do that 2.5 years ago?
Definitely not. She
Yeah,
wouldn't have
right.
even had my phone number.
Right.
Basic.
Mike, how about you?
I think when it comes to like managing a classroom, just again trying to find that time and making that time to check in with students. So I think it's a way more efficient use of time. So talking less, giving less instruction, and having more time to work with smaller groups or individually with students on their tasks. I've seen a lot of improvement with that as a result.
Do you feel that you're able to differentiate instruction more because we've now used technology for that one-to-one experience?
I think so, yeah, because I think that you're given the freedom now to touch base with students and see because again, when you're looking at 25 students in front of you, you know they're all not on the same page,
Right.
but you don't know exactly what page they're on. So by allowing them to either break off or you to step in with them, that allows you to see exactly what it is that they're either struggling, they're missing, or what they're excelling at.
Oh, for the audience, by differentiation, we mean making sure we're meeting the students where they are in their growth as learners, which is going to be different. If we looked at this table, we'd be in 5 different places, which is just reality. But when we're dealing with an entire class in traditional schooling, almost impossible to do. It's like the thinking of giving an IEP to every student in the classroom sounded like craziness a few years back, but now we can get in, give that timely feedback, and measure where each student is in their growth, at least to a much better extent than we could a few years back.
And I think that using the technology that allows us to do that, it also helps us collect data on our students,
Yes.
right? So that was something that I never really put as much focus into. So collecting specific data could be something about what's going on at home, or their other classes, or just what's going on in this class, in my class. So now you have all this great information, and there's so many easy ways to kind of just record that and check in on them. So it really helps, collect your individual student data.
And that data would be only as good as your memory in a traditional classroom, which for me is pretty bad. So,
yeah, it's impossible to read that
Yes.
from in a traditional classroom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jessica?
I'm just thinking of a couple of things. The first, I was just thinking about, I was asking a colleague about, coming here today and talking about silver linings, and she said, well, I know the silver lining is this year when I see the principal coming, he's not to come telling me about positive cases in my class. And last year when she saw his footsteps coming down the hall, it was a real worry, like there's someone in the class, and so I think just a change from the fear, that things are getting better. And, I think that it just, we kind of laughed it off, but, to come and see the principal walking down the hall and say, oh, what's going to happen? And now it's like, hey, what do you need? What can let's talk about this, or whatever other issue it is, but more as a helping, not like that different, it was different to hear that from her.
Yeah,
But
and it
yeah,
hasn't come up
yeah,
yet in our
yeah,
discussions,
yeah.
but that constant possibility of getting sick,
Yeah.
that was kind of over all of this, hanging over the entire process, either your students, your own children, or you getting sick. That alone wore everybody down.
Yeah.
That was tough.
So I like that, footsteps.
Yeah.
So when you hear good footsteps,
Good,
it's
good footsteps,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, and then just the other thing, I saw a cool post about when if you have a 10th grader, their last real year in school was 7th grade. That was their last full year. My son's last full year in 7th grade, and then 8th grade half year, 9th grade last year, and then this year's like getting back. So it was like that same thing. If you had a 4th grader, 1st grade was their last real year, normal year. They
Right.
called it normal. So I think that's just a reflective tool, but
It's
yeah,
something we
so-
should keep in the back of our minds that
Yeah.
this getting back isn't going to be, okay, let's get back. This is
Yeah.
a transition back.
same. And like a 1st grader never had a normal school year.
Right. Right.
So
Billy, how about you?
I think one of the things that I've been considering is being more discerning with the technology. When we were in that circumstance, whether it was hybrid or before, you have something that you want to do, and I'm thinking, all right, is this the most efficient way to do it? Is a Google form the most efficient way to do it? Do I, put a doc that they share, or can I just throw this thing out there and have it be a discussion? We do this thing called connect the dots in U.S. history, where we connect concepts that are seemingly disparate over time, but one step at a time, they're connected. And so, I came up with one where we could just, do it, one kid to the next kid to the next kid to the next kid, and rather than take the time to make a Google form and post it and then check it. In that scenario, that was a waste of time. It was a waste of resources, perhaps. And I found that I was able to achieve the goal in much less time. And the kids were actually into it. They were able to go from one kid to the next. And it was one of those things that I've now now that we're back, quote unquote, I still am mindful of that. I'm still saying, is this really the best allocation of resources right now? Do I have to make a Google form for this? Or can I just throw it out there on the board and then have a discussion about it as a formative assessment, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that I've found that is I think it's helped me. I don't know if it's improved the quality of my instruction, but it definitely has helped.
Well, it saves time and gets to the point, which is your question you put on the board. So yeah, it sounds like a more efficient use of time and better instruction. So yes, sounds like a positive. This isn't a planned question, but I was thinking as we were discussing, how do you see the rest of this year? It's again, we talked about getting back isn't like, okay, let's get back. Getting back is going to be a process. Where are we in that process, and where do we need to be? Take a second to digest.
I'll jump in first.
Go ahead.
Just noticing in 3rd grade, we notice a lot of what Jessica was talking about. So this 3rd graders, their last full normal year of school was kindergarten. And in kindergarten, you're just learning how to sit in a circle and how to take turns and how to listen to each other. And we are definitely practicing those skills only within 3rd grade content. So it is challenging, and we can see that every day they're coming in knowing a new part of the routine, of the daily routine. And so that's really been where our focus has been for these first maybe 6 or so weeks of school, has been building that routine and getting them to work with each other within that routine and things like that. So I think something that has stuck from everything is that the human piece of it all, of they have to be able to work within the classroom and work with each other and rely on each other within our small community in order to keep learning academics as well.
Billy, how about you?
This is a major issue for us. I mean, you know, because I teach AP US History and I teach AP Government Politics, and a lot of the, you know, the reality of our situation is they do have a standardized test. They do have a multiple choice. They do have DBQs, LEQs, SAQs. They have all these things, and you know, Uncle Google's not going to be there to help them, you know, when the time comes. So we've been trying to stress, at least I've been trying to stress, this, you know, this is a process. There's going to have to be some degree of patience with everybody, parents included, myself, the students especially, because you're not going to get back there. You can't eat a whale in one bite, so you have to take little, you know, little victories. You know, it's going to require learning how to take notes, because you're right. I mean, the kids that I have now, you know, freshman year, you know, was the last time, you know, they, you know, took a real test with, you know, without notes, and wrote essays without notes, and so it's, you know, it's going to be the homework. It's going to be the you know, in-class note-taking. And, you know, one of the things you alluded to earlier, I think, is the efficacy of homework. And there are some, you know, reconsiderations there, whether it's deadlines or penalties or what have you. But it is a major concern. And, you know, I don't know that there ever is such a thing as normal. This is just where we are. And this is the reality of the circumstances for these kids. And we're going to do the best we can to help them. But you know, I keep coming back to, you got to be patient. You have to keep moving forward. It's, you know, it's about progress, really. You're not going to get back there. And some of them is going to take more time than others, and that's okay. But it is a major concern, and it's a major concern, you know, for kids that left here and went to college. It's a major concern for kids in the middle school that are coming to the high school, and everybody's kind of in the same boat. And if everybody understands that, I think we can all get there.
Yeah. Yes. Jessica?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is resiliency. I've been living by that word, because we all went through something hard, and we all are picking up the pieces and the best we can, and we're teaching our students that as well, and that you can go through something hard, you can learn from it, and you can become better and improve and do better next time, and, you know, not beat yourself up so much over it. And I think that goes to the human side, like Meredith is talking about, but resiliency is really important.
I agree. I think, you know, both in the classroom with our students and as professional organizations, having a culture of continual improvement is where we are right now. And understanding that we're not there, but we're continually moving in a positive direction. I think that's important. And we're just about out of time, so I'd like to thank you for your participation. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate your time and your efforts and all you do for our kids.